Students, today we discuss the poem Ode to the West Wind by P.B. Shelley. P.B. Shelley's famous poem Ode to the West Wind is a masterpiece. This poem is in the form of a prayer. A prayer has three constituents: a god or goddesses to whom the prayer is made, a supplicant, a person who makes the prayer, and the prayer. The god or goddesses here in the poem is the west wind. The supplicant is the poet himself, and the prayer is for personal redemption and for poetic inspiration. In the first three stanzas, the poet describes the power of the west wind on the earth, in the sky, and on the sea. In the fourth and fifth stanza, his prayer to the west wind is stated. In this logical evolution, the poem is matching here with the artistic device of John Keats at its best. The first stanza is taken up with the effect of the west wind as a destroyer and preserver on the earth. The poet calls the west wind both the destroyer and preserver. Destroyer in the sense that it takes away the dead leaves and destroys them because the dead leaves are of no use. Preserver in the sense the west wind also takes away seeds with the dead leaves and bury the seeds in the sand. And when autumn season comes, the seeds got sprouted. So the west wind is both the destroyer and preserver. In the second stanza, the poet describes the violent commotion in the sky and the action of the wind in collecting the vast quantity of vapor for the autumnal rains. The third stanza describes the activities of the west wind on the surface of this ocean and its effect upon sea blooms and osier wood. In the fourth stanza, the poet addresses a prayer to the uncontrollable wind to lift him from the thrones of life where he lies and he is bleeding. In the last stanza, he implores the timeless wind to become his spirit and blow the clarion of his prophecy to kindle a new birth in the dark and despairing world. This prayer is for poetic inspiration for the good of mankind. In this poem, the poet also reveals his attitude towards nature. From this point of view, also it is Shelley's characteristic poem. Shelley did not believe with Wordsworth that the contemplation of nature works in a wise passiveness would strengthen and inform the soul. He was attracted more by nature's forces than by her works. For him, the wind is alive, the woods are but the instruments upon which it plays. In this respect, Shelley is more akin to the primitive man than to Wordsworth. Shelley calls the west wind the far sweeping preserver of the seeds of the future, the herald of the spring, which when winter comes cannot be far behind. The poet says in the poem, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? Winter is symbolic of the hard days and spring are good days. So the poet believes that change is the rule of nature. After winter, there will certainly be spring. Another aspect of Shelley, the poet of nature, revealed in this poem is his love of sudden transformation on the surface of earth, sky, and ocean as a result of the energetic operation of the forces of nature. In this poem, the power of myth making is also revealed. The myth making power of Shelley is also present in the description of the approaching storm, which is visualized as a terrible Maenad with her flowing locks of hair. The poet also expresses his scientific attitude in the poem. Shelley's admirable skill in presenting the scientific facts in terms of poetic expression is also seen here in this poem. Thus, the patches of cloud floating on the stream of the wind are likened to the dry leaves shaken from the tangled branches of ocean and sky. The fusion of the personal and universal element in the poem. The ode is also remarkable for the fusion of the personal and universal elements. The wild wind sweeping with impetuous energy in the world puts the dead and dry leaves to flight and chariot the winged seeds to their dark wintry bed for future emergence of life. This becomes, in the eye of the poet, an embodiment of that active principle in the world which is constantly at work to bring about a bodiless revolution in society and purge it all its dross and the dull weight of customs. The poet wants to say that certainly there will be the death of the age old customs which are of no use, and certainly there will be rebirth of the new ideology, new thought, new way of thinking. In this great poem, the force of nature, the poet perceives a great kinship with his own spirit. Hence, he appealed to the west wind to blow through him. The poet wants to blow the wind through him and make him its lyre and becomes its external expression of his internal longings and instinctive aspirations. Make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. The poet says in the poem, drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to quicken a new birth, and by the incarnation of this verse scatter as from an unextinguished hearth, ashes and sparks my words among mankind. The poet wants to convey the message, want to spread his message through the west wind about the newness, about the rebirth, about the new creation of world. The poem is a fine blending of Shelley's poignant personal note with his stirring optimism about the future of mankind. The personal pathos reaches its intensity in the following lines. The poet says, I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. A heavy weight of hours has chained and bowed. One, two, like thee, tameless and swift and proud. Oh, lift me as a wave, as a cloud. But the prophetic rapture rises to its height in the last stanza, where the wind is prayed to proclaim to the unawakened earth the ringing message of hope for the good of mankind. The poet says, be through my lips to unawakened earth, the trumpet of prophecy, O wind. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? If winter is there, if hard days are there, if the useless customs are there, certainly there will be a change. So the poet says, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? This poem shows P.B. Shelley's genius. He is a poet of great genius. The structure, the rhythmical structure of this great ode deserves careful study as a typical example of Shelley's power to make the movement of the verse embody its mood. A great force sweeps through it from the first line to the last, felt in the moment of the quick succession of the images and similes. In most of the stanzas, there is not a single full stop to check the stanza form of the ode. The poem is written in a complicated stanza form of 14 lines each and technically known as terza rima. Its rhyming scheme is AB, AB, CD, CD, C, DED, EE. The meter divided into short periods is managed with complete mastery. So this poem is a masterpiece of P.B. Shelley. Thank you.